At my divorce hearing, I sat across from my ex-wife, Harper. After 32 years of marriage, she claimed I had destroyed her life, accusing me of workplace harassment, financial abuse, and even stealing from the company where I'd worked for decades. My career was ruined, my reputation shattered, and worst of all, my daughter believed every word she said. It was over. But then right there in that courtroom, my daughter stood up. With trembling hands, she held up a flash drive. "Your Honor, may I show you something my mother doesn't know about?" she said, her voice shaking but resolute. Judge Foster raised an eyebrow. Harper's face went pale. As the video began to play, the entire courtroom fell silent. "Before you keep watching, tell me, where are you watching from right now? And have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted for decades? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your story." My name is Vaughn Richardson. I'm 58 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything and then got my life back. But it all started 32 years ago. I still remember Harper the way she was that first day. Not just her face, though. I remember that too, the way her eyes caught the light, how she tilted her head when she laughed. I remember the yellow dress she wore. It wasn't fancy, nothing expensive, just simple cotton that somehow made her look like she'd stepped out of a summer photograph. We met at a company mixer of all places. I was 26, fresh out of business school, trying hard to impress people I didn't care about. Then Harper walked past and suddenly nothing else mattered. Within a year we were married. Within 2 we had Beth. And for 30 years, I genuinely believed I had everything a man could want. Harper made the choice to stay home after Beth was born. She'd been working in marketing, good job, real career potential, but she didn't hesitate. "I want to be present for our daughter," she told me one evening, her hand resting on her swollen belly. There was no resentment in her voice, no regret, just certainty, and I believed her completely. I thought that certainty would carry us forever. She built a life around our family that was warm and real. Every school play she was there in the front row, cheering louder than anyone else. Every birthday she'd spend hours in the kitchen making Beth's favorite chocolate cake from scratch. When Beth fell off her bike and scraped her knee, Harper didn't just bandage it. She sat with her daughter until the tears stopped telling stories that made her laugh through the pain. Harper was the glue. She held us together with a kind of quiet strength I thought was unbreakable. I threw myself into work. 60-hour weeks, business trips that sometimes stretched into months, endless meetings with people whose names I'd forget by the next morning. But it all felt worth it because I was building something. Every promotion, every raise, every step up the corporate ladder, I was doing it for my family. Harper seemed to support every decision. She never complained when I missed a school event. She never made me feel guilty when I got home late, which was often. Or maybe she did, and I was just too focused on the next deal to notice. By the time I turned 55, I'd become the operations manager of a major corporation. We lived in a beautiful house with a yard where Beth had learned to ride a bike. My salary was comfortable. We took vacations. We went to nice restaurants. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Then somewhere around 4 years ago, everything shifted. It wasn't sudden. It was like watching the seasons change slow at first, so gradual you almost don't notice, until one day you realize the leaves are gone and winter's here. Harper became distant. She'd spend hours on her phone, always moving to another room when I walked in. Our conversations, once filled with laughter and the kind of inside jokes that only couples understand, became short and polite. "How was work?" "Fine." "How was your day?" "Good." That was it. I tried to reach her. I really did. I asked what was wrong, if I'd done something, if we were okay. But Harper would just say, "There's nothing wrong, Vaughn. I'm fine." And then she'd turn away. Looking back now, I realize I was blind. Completely blind. The woman I loved was pulling away, and I thought I just needed to work harder, earn more, give her more things. I had no idea that she was preparing something. I had no idea that the woman I loved was about to turn my entire world upside down. Then everything changed. Harper called me at work on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I was in the middle of a meeting and my assistant had to interrupt me. That wasn't unusual, it happened sometimes. But there was something in her voice when she said, "Your wife is on the line. She says it's urgent." I excused myself and took the call in my office. The moment I heard Harper's voice, I knew something was wrong. There was a coldness to it, a deliberateness that I'd never heard before. "I want a divorce," she said. No preamble, no warning, just those 4 words dropped like a stone into still water. I actually laughed. I thought she was joking. Harper, come on. What's this about? I'm serious, Vaughn. I want out. I'm done. My chest tightened. Done with what? What happened? Can we talk about this tonight? There's nothing to talk about, she said flatly. I've already talked to a lawyer. That's when I realized she wasn't joking. But before I could say anything else, she hit me with the real blow. I'm also filing a complaint with your company. You've been sexually harassing me for years. It stops now. I felt the room spin. What, Harper? What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. And I have documentation. Then she hung up. I sat there in my office phone, still in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. Sexual harassment, documentation. It made no sense. Our marriage had problems, sure, but nothing like that. Nothing even close to that. What I didn't know then was that Harper had already set everything in motion. While I was sitting there confused, she was meeting with a lawyer named Richard Sutton, a lawyer who specialized in exactly this kind of case. A lawyer who had a very particular way of operating, one that involved building cases on allegations, not evidence. At home that evening, when Beth arrived from work, Harper was waiting for her. I'd learn about this conversation much later through Beth herself, but Harper had told our daughter that her father, me, had been hurting her, that I'd been cruel, controlling, abusive. Our daughter, who was 28 years old and living on her own, but still close to her mother, believed every word. Why wouldn't she? I'd never given her reason to doubt Harper. The allegations escalated from there. Financial abuse. Vaughn had been stealing from their joint accounts, Harper claimed. She'd mismanaged their money, spent recklessly on things she'd never bought. But somehow in Attorney Sutton's hands, those statements became documented facts. Evidence. Within a week, my company received a formal complaint. A woman alleging that I had sexually harassed her in the workplace. The company couldn't ignore it. They had to investigate. At first, my colleagues still treated me normally, but that didn't last long. By the second week, people were different. A conversation would stop when I walked into a room. Emails that once came freely now felt strained. My boss, Harrison Reed, someone I'd worked with for 15 years, asked me to come to his office. His expression was careful, neutral. Vaughn, we've received some serious allegations. We need to conduct a formal investigation. I think it's best if you take some time away from the office while we figure this out. I tried to defend myself to explain that this was all a misunderstanding, but he'd already made up his mind. The company had a reputation to protect, and in his eyes, I was now a liability. That's when I realized the true genius of what Harper had done. She didn't just accuse me of cheating or being a bad husband. She'd weaponized my career. She'd turned the very thing I'd built my professional reputation, my standing in the corporate world, into the instrument of my destruction. That's when everything I had worked for began to crumble. And I still had no idea what Harper was really planning. 3 weeks after Harper's allegations, everything fell apart. The investigation that had started quietly had become impossible to ignore. Rumors spread through the office like a virus. People I'd worked with for years suddenly couldn't look me in the eye. And then on a Friday afternoon, Harrison Reed's assistant called. Mr. Reed would like to see you in his office. Now, I knew what was coming. Some part of me had known it was inevitable from the moment the allegations hit. Still, nothing prepared me for how it would feel. Harrison's office was on the executive floor. I'd been there countless times before for promotion celebrations, strategic meetings. This time was different. When I walked in, he didn't stand up to greet me. He just sat behind his desk, his expression carefully neutral. Vaughn, he started, and I could hear the rehearsal in his voice. He'd practiced this. We've completed our preliminary review of the allegations against you. I nodded, waiting. The company has to take these matters very seriously. You understand that, I'm sure. Of course, I said, and I want to tell you. Harrison raised his hand. Let me finish. We've spoken with our legal team. They've advised us that the best course of action is for you to step down from your position. The words didn't register at first. Step down, like I was making a choice. Harrison, I haven't done anything wrong. I want to address these allegations directly. Let me speak to... It's not about what you did or didn't do, he interrupted. His eyes finally met mine, and there was something like pity in them. Or maybe it was just discomfort. It's about the company's reputation. Right now, your presence here is a distraction. The allegations alone, true or false, are creating a hostile work environment. I felt my chest tighten. So you're firing me? We're asking for your resignation. Effective immediately. It's cleaner that way. For everyone. Cleaner. As if my career, my reputation, my entire professional identity were something that could be disposed of neatly. I left his office in a daze. People watched me walk through the corridors. Some looked away, others stared openly. By Monday morning, the news would be everywhere, at least within the company. Vaughn Richardson, the operations manager, had resigned amid allegations of sexual harassment. That was all anyone would remember. Not my 20 years of service. Not the projects I'd led. Not the people I'd mentored. Just the allegations. That weekend I sat in my house, the same house Harper and I had bought together, that we'd raised Beth in, and I felt completely alone. The phone didn't ring. No one reached out. I'd lost my job, yes, but worse than that, I'd lost my credibility. People I'd considered friends seemed to have made their choice. They believed Harper. I didn't leave the house for 3 days. I sat in my study staring at nothing. I thought about calling Beth, but what would I say? Her mother had already poisoned her against me. And Harrison had made it clear that denying the allegations would only look like I was defensive guilty. It was Mark Sterling who finally broke through the silence. He called on the 4th day. Mark had been one of my oldest friends, someone I'd worked with before we both moved up through the corporate ranks. He was one of the few people who hadn't disappeared. "Vaughn, I know what happened," Mark said over the phone. "I know this is bullshit, and I know a good lawyer." "I can't afford a lawyer," I said flatly. The financial reality was starting to hit. Without my job, without my income, everything would unravel quickly. "Don't worry about that right now. I want you to meet someone. His name is Gerald Stone. He's not expensive, but he's damn good. And more importantly, he actually cares about justice." Gerald Stone. The name meant nothing to me then. I didn't know that this one phone call would set in motion the events that would eventually save my life. Mark set up a meeting for the following Tuesday. That day, sitting in a modest office that was nothing like the sleek corporate headquarters I'd worked in, I met with Gerald Stone. He was a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and the kind of calm confidence that came from having seen it all before. "Tell me everything," he said, "and don't leave anything out." As I told him my story, the marriage, Harper's sudden coldness, the allegations, the company's response, something shifted inside me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like someone was actually listening. Someone believed me. But losing my job was just the beginning of my descent. It was nothing compared to what I was about to lose next. My daughter Beth was 28 years old when everything fell apart. She was old enough to understand complexity, old enough to have her own life and her own opinions. But she was still young enough, I suppose, to believe her mother without question. Beth had always been close to me. When she was younger, she'd wait for me to come home from work running to the door with excitement, even when I was late. We'd spend weekends together, movies, baseball games, late-night conversations about her dreams and fears. Those memories felt precious to me now, like artifacts from a different lifetime. But Harper had been strategic. She'd started planting seeds of doubt about me long before the accusations came. Comments here and there. "Your father works too much," she'd say when Beth called. "He's never really interested in what you're doing." Little lies mixed with half-truths, designed to create a narrative. Then after the formal allegations dropped, Harper went for the kill. I found out later what she'd told Beth. I didn't hear it directly. Beth wouldn't take my calls long enough to tell me, but I pieced it together from the fragments she threw at me during our few interactions. "Your father has been hurting me," Harper had told her. "He's done terrible things. I'm protecting myself and you." It was a masterclass in manipulation. By framing her deception as protection, Harper had transformed herself into the heroic parent and me into the villain. The first time I tried to call Beth after the allegations, she didn't answer. I left a message. "Beth, sweetheart, it's Dad. I just want to talk. Please call me back." She didn't. I tried again the next day, and the day after that. By the end of the week, I'd left 6 voicemails. None of them got a response. The silence was deafening. My own daughter was choosing not to speak to me. I sent text messages, carefully worded messages that tried to explain without sounding defensive. "Beth, I know you've heard things. I'd like to tell you my side of the story." Nothing. "Sweetheart, I miss you. Can we please just talk?" The messages went through. I could see the delivered status, but no response. There's a particular kind of pain that comes from being rejected by your child. It's different from any other pain. It cuts deeper because it touches the part of you that was supposed to be unconditional, your love for your child. But I realized that love, as strong as it was, might not be enough. I tried to see her in person. One evening I drove to her apartment. She lived in the city about 20 minutes from where Harper and I had lived. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to find the courage to walk up to her door. Finally, I did. When Beth opened the door and saw me, her face closed up. She looked at me like she was looking at a stranger. Worse than a stranger, she looked at me like she was looking at a predator. Beth, please, can we just talk for 5 minutes? I don't think that's a good idea, she said quietly. Your mother has... I don't want to hear it. Beth interrupted, her voice cold in a way I'd never heard from her before. Mom told me everything. I believe her. Beth, you don't understand. Your mother is... Dad? She said the word like it tasted bad in her mouth. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. Please don't come here again. Then she closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a long time after that, unable to move. My daughter had just shut me out. Not because I'd done anything wrong to her, but because she'd been poisoned against me by someone she trusted more. Harper had won. She'd taken the one thing I loved most in the world and used it as a weapon. At that moment, I had lost everything. My marriage was over. My career was destroyed. My reputation was in tatters. And now my relationship with my daughter was gone too. I was completely alone. Not just in the way I'd been alone after losing my job. This was a different kind of alone. This was abandonment. I had hit rock bottom. There was nowhere left to fall. But sitting in my car that night, staring at Beth's closed door, I made a decision. It was a desperate decision, born out of complete hopelessness. But it would change everything that came after. One evening, I took a chance. I knew it might be my last opportunity to reach my daughter. So I decided to break Harper's control over Beth. I had to try. I didn't just show up at her apartment again. I learned from that disaster. Instead, I carefully planned this. I sent her a text. Beth, I know you don't want to see me, but I'm asking for 5 minutes, just 5, at Riverside Cafe near the park. It's public, it's safe, please. I wasn't sure she'd come. In fact, I expected her to ignore it. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe exhaustion from the tension, made her respond, 5 minutes, that's it? The relief I felt was almost physical. Riverside Cafe was exactly what I needed, neutral ground full of people, bright lights. When Beth arrived, she looked tired. She was wearing a gray sweater I recognized from years ago, and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger than 28, vulnerable, in a way that broke my heart all over again. She sat down across from me, and immediately I could see her wall was still up. She kept glancing toward the door, like she was calculating an escape route. Thank you for coming, I said quietly. She didn't respond, just stared at the table. I took a breath. This was it. This was my one shot. Beth, I know you don't believe me. I'm not going to ask you to believe me. She looked up surprised. Your mother has told you things about me, I continued carefully, and I can't stop her from doing that. I can't control what she says to you, but I can ask you to do something for me. What? Her voice was guarded. I can ask you to look for the truth yourself. Don't believe her. Don't believe me. Just observe. Watch your mother. If you see something that doesn't make sense, if you see something strange, I paused, choosing my words carefully, then record it. Keep evidence. Beth's eyes widened. Dad, what are you... I'm not asking you to spy on her, I said quickly, sensing her hesitation. I'm just asking you to pay attention. Really pay attention. If everything she's told you is true, you won't find anything unusual. But if it's not, I let the sentence hang. She was quiet for a long moment. You're asking me to think my mother is lying. No, I said, and I meant it. I'm asking you not to think anything. I'm asking you to see what's actually there without deciding beforehand what it means. Beth looked down at her hands. I could see the conflict playing across her face, the struggle between loyalty to her mother and the seed of doubt I'd just planted. I love you, I said, and the words came out rough with emotion. I love you so much, Beth, but I'm not going to beg you to believe me. If I did that, I'd be just like her, trying to control what you think. So instead, I'm asking you to find your own truth. She looked up at me, and for just a moment, I saw something shift in her eyes. Not belief exactly, but maybe the beginning of doubt about what she'd been told. Your mother told you I'm a terrible person, I continued. A monster. But you lived with me for 28 years. You know me. You know how I am. So I'm asking you, don't take her word for it. Don't take my word for it. Just look. And if you see things that don't add up, write them down. Record them. Keep them safe. Beth stood up. I don't know what to do with this, Dad. I know, I said. I'm not asking you to do anything right now. I'm just asking you to stay open, stay curious. That's all. She turned to leave, then paused. For a second I thought she might say something else. but instead she just walked out. I didn't know if my words had reached her. But sitting there in that cafe, watching her disappear into the evening crowd, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time since everything fell apart, I felt a tiny spark of hope. After that conversation with her father, Beth couldn't stop thinking about his words. She replayed the conversation in her mind over and over. Observe. Watch your mother. If you see something strange, record it. At first she dismissed the idea. Her mother would never deliberately lie to her, would she? But doubt once planted grows like a weed. The next morning, Beth made a decision. She would pay attention. Really pay attention. She would watch her mother the way her father had asked, without judgment, just observation. It started small. Beth noticed her mother spending long hours on her phone, stepping into other rooms when Beth entered. Harper's voice would change when she was on calls, softer, more animated, almost flirtatious. It was a tone Beth had never heard her use before. One afternoon, Harper was on the phone in the living room. Beth pretended to be reading on the couch, but she was listening. I need to extend this, her mother was saying. Keep the pressure on. The longer this drags out, the more I can claim in damages. Beth's stomach tightened. Extend what? The divorce. The allegations. No, the psychological evaluation is solid, Harper continued. He'll look even worse when confronted with it in court. The casual way her mother was discussing her father's destruction was chilling. This wasn't a woman protecting herself from an abusive husband. This was someone orchestrating a campaign. Over the next week, Beth began to piece things together. She noticed her mother leaving the house late at night, always dressed nicely, always checking her reflection in the mirror. One evening, Beth followed her. Harper drove to a small restaurant across town. Beth waited outside, watching through the window. Her mother sat at a corner table with a man, tall, confident, attractive in a slick way. They didn't look like people discussing business. They looked like they were on a date. The man leaned across the table and kissed Harper. Her mother smiled, not the careful, controlled smile she used around Beth, but a genuine smile, a happy smile, the kind of smile she hadn't worn in years. Beth's hands clenched into fists. She watched as Harper took the man's hand across the table, watched as they laughed together, watched as her mother, the woman who claimed her father had destroyed her, who demanded sympathy and protection, looked completely content. The man whispered something to Harper. Her mother threw her head back and laughed a sound that echoed across the restaurant. Then she said something that made Beth's blood run cold. Don't worry, Harper said. In a few weeks I'll have everything. Then we can leave all of this behind. Leave, as in leave Vaughn, leave Beth, leave everything. Beth pulled out her phone and started recording through the window. The video quality wasn't great, but it captured enough. She captured her mother's betrayal. Over the following days, Beth continued her surveillance. She positioned herself to overhear phone calls. She watched as her mother coordinated with a lawyer, a man with a shark smile, who clearly had no interest in justice, only in winning. And then came the worst part. Beth overheard a conversation between her mother and the man she was seeing. The man Beth had started thinking of as the other man. Beth will adjust, Harper was saying casually. She's resilient, and honestly, she'll be better off with her father anyway. He can give her stability. Beth felt something break inside her. Her mother had just admitted in passing that the entire narrative about Vaughn being an unfit parent was a lie. Harper knew it was a lie. She just didn't care. That's when Beth made her choice. She was going to find out the complete truth no matter what it cost her. And she was going to get proof, real, undeniable proof. Proof that would expose everything her mother had done. I didn't know what Beth was doing. Not at first. 3 days after our coffee shop conversation, I started noticing small changes. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, a photo of Harper, and a man I didn't recognize embracing outside a restaurant. The message read, "Don't worry, Dad. I'm handling this." My heart stopped. I tried calling her back, but the line went dead. Fear and hope twisted inside me simultaneously. Was my daughter in danger, or was she doing exactly what I'd asked, searching for the truth? Over the next week, the evidence arrived in fragments, sometimes through encrypted messages, sometimes as voice notes I could barely hear. Each one was a piece of the puzzle I'd been trying to solve alone. A conversation between Harper and someone named Richard, her lawyer, I realized discussing how to extend the proceedings and destroy my credibility further. Harper's voice was cold, calculated. "I need more people to accuse him," she said. "One woman won't be enough. I listened to my wife, the woman I'd loved for 32 years, conspiring to fabricate testimonies against me. Then came the recordings of Harper with Victor. My stomach churned as I heard her laugh at me, at our marriage, at everything we'd built together. She believed every word Harper said. My own daughter thinks her father's a monster. But the worst part came next. I heard Harper discussing doctored photographs, old pictures of our messy house from when I'd been sick with the flu, now time-stamped to look recent. I heard her talking about edited videos, clips of me raising my voice spliced together to look aggressive, violent, all fabrications. My hands shook as I listened to my wife explain to Victor how she'd manipulated Beth. "Just tell her if she doesn't help, Mommy, Daddy will take her away," Harper instructed. "Use fear. It works every time." I had to stop the recording. I couldn't listen anymore, but Beth kept sending them. There was Harper on the phone with Richard discussing how to claim I'd hit her bruises, she would fabricate injuries that never happened. "How can he prove I'm lying?" she'd ask coldly. "It's my word against his, and the judge will believe me." My daughter was collecting evidence of a conspiracy so elaborate, so premeditated, that it felt almost unreal. My wife hadn't simply decided to leave me. She had planned to destroy me systematically, methodically, completely. And then came the conversation between Harper and Victor about Miami. "Once I have the assets, we disappear," Harper said. "New names, new life. Beth will forget about her father in 6 months. Kids are resilient." I replayed that sentence over and over. My daughter, my beautiful, intelligent daughter, was supposed to forget me. I was supposed to be erased from her life like I'd never existed. But Beth wasn't letting that happen. One evening my phone rang. It was Beth. Her voice was different, no longer angry, no longer distant. It was determined. "Dad, I have everything," she said quietly. "All of it. Every conversation, every lie, every plan. I'm going to help you. I need you to contact your lawyer and tell him to expect evidence from me." I couldn't speak. For the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. Not just hope, but vindication, and more importantly, reconciliation. "Beth, you don't have to—" "I have to, Dad," she interrupted. "It's the only way, and it's the right thing to do." After she hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment, holding my phone, and for the first time since Harper had called me at work with those devastating words, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't going to lose everything after all. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Attorney Gerald Stone before breakfast. "Vaughn," he answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the early hour. "What's happened?" "My daughter," I said, my voice still shaky. "She's collected evidence, recordings, conversations between my ex-wife and her lawyer discussing fabricated claims. Between my ex-wife and her lover about their plan to steal our assets. Everything, Gerald. She has everything." There was a long pause on the line. "Send it to me immediately," Stone said. "And Vaughn, don't tell anyone else. Not yet. We need to verify authenticity, establish chain of custody, make sure it's admissible in court." 2 hours later, Beth arrived at my apartment for the first time in months. She looked exhausted, older somehow. The weight of what she'd done, what she'd discovered about her own mother, was etched into her face. She handed me a flash drive. "Everything's on there," she said quietly. "Audio files, video recordings, timestamps. I also created transcripts and notes. There are at least 15 separate conversations where Mom admits to the scheme. She talks about the doctored photos, the edited videos, the fake abuse claims. She discusses paying Richard Sutton to coach me into lying. I wanted to embrace her. I wanted to thank her. But I also felt the gravity of what this moment meant. She had turned against her own mother to save me. "Beth, do you understand what's going to happen?" I asked carefully. "Your mother is going to hate you for this. The court will—" "I know, Dad," she interrupted, her eyes meeting mine. "I've thought about nothing else. But she lied to me. She used me. She was going to make me destroy you with false testimony. And then she was going to run away to Miami and pretend I didn't exist." Beth's voice cracked slightly. "I can't let her do that. Not to you. Not to me." That afternoon, I sat in Attorney Stone's office while he reviewed the files. His expression darkened with each recording. "My God," he whispered at one point. This is conspiracy, fraud, perjury, attempted witness tampering. This is criminal Vaughn, not just civil. Criminal." "Can we use it?" I asked. "We're going to do more than use it," Stone said, looking at me with something I hadn't seen in months, confidence. "We're going to bury her with it, but we need to be smart. We file this with the court, notify the district attorney, and let them decide on criminal charges. We also need Beth prepared for testimony. Over the next week, Beth and I met with Stone multiple times. She walked through each recording, explaining the context, the dates, what she'd been thinking when she recorded it. She was nervous, but composed, more adult than I'd ever seen her. On the night before trial, Beth sent me a text. "I'm scared, Dad, but I know we're doing the right thing." I texted back, "I know you are, sweetheart, and I'm proud of you. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you." I meant it, completely. Tomorrow we would walk into that courtroom with the truth finally in our hands. And this time, we wouldn't be alone. The courtroom hallway felt like a gauntlet. My shoes echoed against the marble floor as Attorney Stone and I walked toward the waiting area. It was 8:47 a.m. The trial would begin in 13 minutes. I'd counted each one. "Vaughn, sit down," Stone said, guiding me to a wooden bench outside the courtroom doors. "We need to talk." His tone made my stomach drop. I'd heard that tone before the night he'd first taken my case, when he'd warned me about the uphill battle ahead. "The judge received Harper's evidence packet this morning," Stone continued, his voice low. "Photos of the house, credit card statements, a psychological evaluation claiming you have violent tendencies. It's damning." I stared at my hands. They looked foreign to me, the hands of a man who'd lost everything. "We're going to lose, aren't we?" I asked quietly. Stone didn't answer immediately. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. "Vaughn, listen to me. Their case is strong, very strong. Without your daughter's evidence, I'd tell you to prepare for the worst." My chest tightened. I'd been clinging to the hope that Beth would be here, that somehow, against all odds, she would finally stand beside me, that the evidence she'd promised would materialize into something tangible, something real enough to save me. "But we have what they don't," Stone said. "We have the truth." At 8:58 a.m. we stood and walked toward the courtroom doors. The moment I stepped inside, I felt every eye on me. Judge William Foster sat elevated behind his bench, his silver hair and weathered face carrying the weight of decades spent separating truth from lies. He didn't look at me, not yet. Harper sat at the opposing table in a navy blazer, her posture perfect, her expression composed. Next to her, Richard Sutton arranged papers with practiced efficiency. Behind them, Victor Chandler sat in the gallery, his presence a silent statement of allegiance. I scanned the courtroom, searching the gallery for Beth's face. My eyes moved across the rows of observers, a few court reporters, some legal interns, a handful of spectators I didn't recognize. My gaze lingered on each row, hoping to find her familiar features. But she wasn't there. My heart sank. A moment of weakness washed over me. Had she changed her mind? Had Harper somehow convinced her not to come? The weight of that possibility pressed down on my shoulders like a physical force. Behind the empty seats, Mark Sterling stood near the back, having just entered. My oldest friend gave me a subtle nod of support, but even that couldn't fill the void left by Beth's absence. Stone guided me to our table. I sat my palms, already sweating, my eyes still occasionally drifting back to the gallery, hoping against hope that she would walk through those doors. Judge Foster looked up from his papers, his gray eyes scanning the courtroom with the gravity of someone accustomed to making decisions that shattered lives. "This court is now in session," the bailiff announced. "Case Richardson versus Richardson. Divorce proceedings with custody and asset division disputes." Foster adjusted his glasses. "Before we begin, I want to establish something clearly. This case involves serious allegations: harassment, financial abuse, custody disputes. I expect both counsel to present evidence that is factual, verifiable, and credible." He paused, letting his gaze linger on each lawyer. "Perjury is a criminal offense. I trust everyone understands the gravity of that statement." Richard Sutton nodded confidently. Stone remained perfectly still. "We will begin with the petitioner's opening statement," Foster continued. "Counsel for Harper Richardson, you may proceed." Sutton stood buttoning his jacket with theatrical precision. He approached the judge's bench and began his presentation. He painted me as a predator, a thief, a man who'd hidden assets and abused his wife behind closed doors. His words were sharp, practiced, devastatingly effective. I sat motionless, my attention divided between Sutton's damning words and the persistent hope that the courtroom doors would suddenly open, that Beth would appear ready to fight for me, ready to stand against her mother. But the doors remained closed. Everything, absolutely everything, depended on the next few hours, and I would have to face them alone. Richard Sutton rose with the calculated grace of a man who'd won this battle 100 times before. His navy suit was pristine. His silver cufflinks caught the courtroom lights. He moved toward Judge Foster like an actor stepping into his spotlight. "Your Honor." Sutton began, his voice measured and authoritative. "This case, while emotionally complex, is fundamentally straightforward. The evidence will demonstrate a clear pattern of financial irresponsibility, emotional abuse, and willful neglect by the respondent." Stone shifted beside me, his jaw tightening. Sutton held up the first photograph, our kitchen. The sink was overflowing with dishes. Countertops were cluttered. The trash was full. "These images," Sutton said, directing Foster's attention to the display board, "were taken approximately 1 month ago. They illustrate the condition of the marital home. My client has been subjected to living in these conditions while raising their daughter alone. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to shout that I'd been sick, that one flu had become pneumonia, that I'd been bedridden for 2 weeks. But Stone's hand pressed against my arm, warning me to stay silent. Furthermore," Sutton continued, "we have credit card statements." He displayed them on a second board, highlighting charges in red marker. "Designer handbags, restaurant meals exceeding $200 per night, weekend hotel stays, all charged while my client worked and sacrificed." Another lie. Every charge he'd highlighted was either Harper's purchase or a joint expense she'd insisted on. The hotel stays were vacations she'd demanded, anniversary trips she'd planned. I could feel sweat gathering at my temples. Sutton then presented a document, the psychological evaluation. "Your Honor, my client also sought professional assessment of the respondent's behavior. Dr. Margaret Chen, a licensed psychologist, has evaluated Mr. Richardson and documented concerning patterns of aggression, emotional manipulation, and narcissistic tendencies." Stone had warned me about this. The psychologist had never met me. The evaluation was a fabrication. Judge Foster's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly as he reviewed the document. "In addition," Sutton said, his voice dropping to a more serious register, "my client has made allegations regarding inappropriate physical contact. While she initially hesitated to discuss these matters publicly, the severity of her experience compels transparency." Harper shifted in her seat, her eyes downcast with practiced shame. Victor Chandler placed a comforting hand on her shoulder from the gallery, a performance clearly orchestrated for courtroom effect. "Your Honor," Sutton concluded, "the evidence overwhelmingly supports transferring full custody of their daughter to my client, awarding all marital assets to my client, and establishing substantial child support and alimony payments from the respondent. The respondent has demonstrated himself to be financially irresponsible, emotionally unstable, and potentially dangerous." Stone stood immediately. "Objection. Counsel is making inflammatory characterizations not supported by admissible evidence." Foster raised a hand. "Sustained. Counsel, please confine your remarks to evidence presented, not conjecture." Sutton nodded, completely unruffled. "Of course, Your Honor. The evidence speaks for itself." He returned to his seat. Harper reached over and squeezed his arm gratefully. I looked at Beth. Her face was pale, her eyes fixed on Harper with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of recognition and revulsion. She knew. She understood what her mother had orchestrated. But knowing and proving were two different things. Stone leaned toward me and whispered, "Now we show them what the truth actually looks like." Judge Foster consulted his notes. "Mr. Stone, you may proceed with the respondent's opening statement." Stone stood and approached the judge. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white. Everything I'd built, my reputation, my career, my relationship with my daughter, hung in the balance. Sutton's presentation had been devastating, polished, professional, believable. With each photograph, each document, each fabricated evaluation, I'd felt my world collapsing. The judge's expression gave nothing away. His neutrality felt like indifference, and indifference felt like defeat. I wondered if anyone in this courtroom could possibly save me from the avalanche of lies that had just been unleashed. Attorney Stone rose with none of Sutton's theatrical confidence. He moved to the center of the courtroom methodically, almost reluctantly, like a man walking toward inevitable defeat. "Your Honor," he began, "counsel for the petitioner has presented evidence that appears damaging on its surface. However, context is critical to understanding what that evidence actually represents." Judge Foster leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable, Regarding the photographs of the marital residence, Stone continued, my client was diagnosed with severe pneumonia approximately 6 weeks before those images were taken. He was hospitalized for 4 days, then bedridden for an additional 2 weeks. The condition of the home reflects a period of genuine medical crisis, not chronic neglect or irresponsibility. Do you have medical records to support this claim? Foster asked, his tone neutral but probing. Stone hesitated just for a moment, but long enough for the courtroom to feel it. My client's physician can testify to medical records, counsel. Foster interrupted. Not testimony, records. Stone's jaw tightened. Your Honor, we can subpoena those records for the record, but that's not an answer to my question, Foster said quietly. He made a note on his pad. The scratch of his pen seemed impossibly loud. I felt my stomach drop. Stone pressed forward. Regarding the credit card statements, the cards in question were joint accounts. While they bear my client's name, the petitioner exercised primary control over these accounts. The luxury purchases, the designer items, the restaurant charges were initiated by the petitioner, often without my client's knowledge or consent. Sutton stood immediately. Your Honor, that's pure speculation. My client can testify that. Counsel, you'll have your opportunity for rebuttal, Foster said calmly. Let Mr. Stone finish. But the damage was already done. Foster's skepticism was evident. Sutton's objection had planted doubt about Stone's claims. As for the allegations of harassment, Stone said, his voice steady but strained, there is no physical evidence, no medical documentation of injuries, no photographs taken contemporaneously with alleged incidents, no police reports, no workplace complaints beyond what the petitioner filed recently after the separation had already begun. The petitioner states these incidents occurred in private, Foster noted, reading from his document. Precisely, Your Honor, Stone replied, which means there are no independent witnesses, no corroborating evidence, only an assertion made months after the alleged incidents, conveniently timed with the initiation of divorce proceedings. It sounded reasonable, logical, but I could see it in Foster's eyes. He didn't believe us. Or rather, he believed Sutton's version more. Sutton raised his hand, slightly seeking acknowledgement. Your Honor, I would submit that abusers typically don't commit their acts in public. That's the nature of domestic abuse. Foster nodded slowly, considering this point. And regarding the psychological evaluation, Stone continued desperately, Dr. Pierce never examined my client. The assessment is based entirely on interviews with the petitioner and documentary review. It's not a clinical diagnosis. It's an opinion formed without proper examination or cross-examination of the subject. Objection, Sutton said. That's argument, not evidence. Foster sustained the objection without comment. Stone stood there for a moment, realizing he was running out of ammunition. He turned back to me, and our eyes met briefly. I saw it clearly. Resignation, sympathy, but no hope. Your Honor, Stone said quietly, my client has been an employed professional for 30 years. He has no criminal record. He has no history of abuse allegations until this moment. The evidence presented by counsel is circumstantial, at best fabricated, at worst. Without concrete proof, without witnesses, without independent corroboration, the allegations should be dismissed. It was a solid argument. It should have been persuasive, but it wasn't enough. Stone returned to our table and sat down. He leaned toward me and spoke so quietly that only I could hear him. I'm sorry, Vaughn. I'm so sorry. I couldn't respond. My throat felt closed. My vision blurred slightly at the edges. Judge Foster reviewed his notes, his pen poised over the paper. I could feel the verdict forming in his mind, a verdict written long before he actually spoke the words. Everything, my career, my reputation, my daughter, my future was evaporating like water under intense heat, and there was nothing left to stop it. Judge Foster closed the case file with deliberate finality. The sound echoed through the courtroom like the closing of a coffin lid. He looked up from his desk, and I saw it, the decision already made, written across his weathered face like a sentence of death. His gray eyes held no sympathy, no uncertainty, only the grim resolve of a man who'd made a judgment. I have reviewed all evidence presented by both counsel. Foster began, his voice carrying the weight of official authority. I have considered the testimonies, the documents, and the arguments made on behalf of both parties. Stone leaned back in his chair, his hand gripping mine under the table. His grip felt like an apology. Before I deliver my ruling, Foster continued, I want to ask if there is anything either counsel wishes to add. Any final statement, or, no, Your Honor. Sutton said immediately, his confidence unmistakable. He knew he'd won. Harper's lips curved into a slight smile, a smile of triumph. Stone shook his head slightly, his shoulders sagging with defeat. Foster adjusted his glasses. Then I am prepared to issue my decision. He opened the case file again, his pen poised over the formal judgment document. This was it. The moment my life would be decided by a stranger's pen. Based on the evidence presented, I find that the courtroom doors suddenly burst open. Beth stood in the doorway, breathless, her hair disheveled as if she'd been running. In her trembling hand was a flash drive. Her eyes were fixed on me for just a fraction of a second, a look of apology mixed with determination before turning to the judge. "Your Honor, wait!" she called out, her voice shaking but audible. "Please, I have something you need to see." The courtroom froze. Every head turned. The bailiff moved forward instinctively. Mark Sterling's eyes widened in surprise, and then understanding Beth had come after all. Harper's face transformed. For an instant hope flickered across her features. She thought Beth was arriving to support her testimony. Then confusion set in as Harper registered the urgency in her daughter's movements, the intensity in Beth's eyes. "Your Honor." Sutton objected, immediately rising from his chair, his perfect composure finally cracking. "This is highly irregular. The witness list is closed. We cannot simply—" "Order," Foster said, firmly raising a hand. But his eyes were on Beth, and there was something in his expression, curiosity, alertness, judicial caution. "Who are you, young lady?" Beth stepped into the courtroom, closing the doors behind her. She walked forward, and I could see her hands shaking as she held the flash drive. "I'm Beth Richardson," she said, and her voice grew steadier as she moved toward the judge's bench. "I'm the daughter of the respondent, and I have evidence recordings that directly contradict everything my mother has claimed in this courtroom." Harper's face went white, then red. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Your Honor," Stone said suddenly, standing beside me, his defeated expression transforming into something sharp and focused. "If I may be heard—" "Sit down, Mr. Stone," Foster said, but his tone wasn't dismissive. It was attentive. He was watching Beth with the intense focus of a judge who sensed something monumental was about to unfold. "Your Honor, this is unacceptable," Sutton protested, his voice rising. "This is a manipulation of courtroom procedure. This girl is the respondent's daughter. Of course she would—" "Miss Richardson," Foster interrupted, his judicial voice cutting through Sutton's objections like a blade. "What exactly do you have?" Beth took a breath. I could see her gathering courage, steeling herself against the magnitude of what she was about to do. "I recorded conversations between my mother and her lawyer," Beth said, her voice clear and unwavering now. "I recorded conversations between my mother and Victor Chandler. The recordings show that my mother fabricated evidence that she coached me to lie in court, and that she and Mr. Chandler planned to steal my father's assets and flee the state." The room erupted. Harper stood abruptly, her face contorted with rage and panic. "She's lying," Harper shrieked. "She's recording without consent. That's illegal. Your Honor, this is a setup. This is entrapment. This is—" "Sit down, Ms. Harper," Foster commanded, his voice cutting through like ice. "Now!" Harper remained standing for a moment, her body trembling with fury, her eyes burning with the kind of rage that comes from losing total control. Then slowly she sat, but her eyes never left Beth, and the look in those eyes was pure venom, pure hatred. Sutton was on his feet, objecting, citing procedural violations, demanding the evidence be excluded. But his voice sounded hollow, now desperate. Foster wasn't listening anymore. His entire focus was on Beth. "Miss Richardson," Foster said calmly, "do you have these recordings with you?" "Yes, Your Honor," Beth replied, holding up the flash drive. Her hand was steady now. "Everything is documented. Audio files, video recordings, and written transcripts with timestamps." For the first time since the trial began, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not quite hope, I was too afraid to hope, but something that felt like possibility, awakening from a long sleep. Judge Foster leaned back in his chair, studying Beth with an expression of someone who understood that everything had just changed. "This court is taking a recess," Foster announced, his voice formal and authoritative. "Ms. Richardson, you will come to my chambers with that evidence. We will examine it thoroughly. And we will determine," he said, his eyes moving to Harper and then to Sutton, "exactly what has transpired here." As the bailiff announced the recess and the courtroom began to move, I realized I was gripping Stone's hand so hard my knuckles had turned white. Beth had come. She had chosen me, and everything, absolutely everything, had just changed. The courtroom reassembled 15 minutes later, but the atmosphere had transformed completely. There was electricity in the air now, the kind of tension that precedes a revelation that would alter everything. Beth stood near the judge's bench, the flash drive still in her hand. She looked smaller than usual, dwarfed by the formal setting, but her posture remained rigid with resolve. Judge Foster settled back into his chair. "Miss Richardson, you may proceed. Please explain what we are about to hear." Beth took a breath. "Thuatoa. I recorded conversations between my mother and her attorney, Richard Sutton, and between my mother and Victor Chandler. These recordings document a conspiracy to fabricate evidence against my father and to seize marital assets." Sutton's face had gone pale. Harper's jaw clenched visibly. "With your permission, Your Honor." Beth continued, "I'd like to play excerpts of these recordings." Foster nodded. "Ms. Rodriguez, please set up the audio." Court Clerk Elena Rodriguez connected Beth's flash drive to the courtroom speaker system. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that feels like holding one's breath before a storm. The first recording played. It was Harper's voice, unmistakable and cold, discussing strategy with Richard Sutton. In it, she outlined her plan to fabricate additional witnesses, to exaggerate claims, to manipulate evidence timing. The specificity was damning. Numbers, dates, calculated deceptions discussed with legal precision. "I need more ammunition," Harper's recorded voice said. "The current allegations alone won't guarantee a favorable ruling." Sutton's voice responded, "We can reach out to former colleagues." "No," Harper interrupted. "It needs to look organic, natural. That's how we win." Harper leaned forward in her seat, her face flushing red. "Turn it off," she hissed at Beth. "Your Honor." Sutton objected weakly. "The authenticity of these recordings has not been established." Foster raised a hand. "Continue, Miss Richardson." The next excerpt was Harper, with Victor discussing their escape plan. Her voice was casual, even cheerful, describing how she would liquidate assets and disappear to Miami. She talked about Beth forgetting her father, about their new life together, about Vaughn's destroyed reputation. "Once I have the custody ruling and the assets, we can finally leave," Harper's recorded voice said. "He'll be bankrupt. He'll be alone. She'll forget about him in 6 months. Children are remarkably adaptable." Victor laughed in the background. Harper stood abruptly. "This is a lie. These are fabricated. She edited them. She—" "Sit down, Ms. Harper," Foster commanded, his voice like steel. "You will have your opportunity to respond." But Harper didn't sit. Instead, she turned to Beth, and the expression on her face was something I'd never seen before, a raw, unfiltered rage that seemed to consume her entirely. "Beth," Harper's voice rose to a shriek, How could you betray me like this? I sacrificed everything for you, everything." "You sacrificed nothing for me," Beth replied, her voice steady despite the tears forming in her eyes. "You sacrificed my father. You sacrificed the truth. You tried to make me your weapon." "Lies!" Harper screamed. "You ungrateful little—" Another recording played. This one captured Harper explicitly instructing Beth to fabricate testimony. "Just tell the judge your father hurt you," Harper's recorded voice instructed. "Tell him he touched you. Tell him he yelled. Make him sound like a monster. The judge will believe you. Children are believed, and men like your father are guilty until proven innocent." The courtroom fell deathly silent. Foster's expression hardened. This was no longer a divorce case. This was criminal conspiracy, perjury, witness, tampering. Harper's face went beyond red, it went purple. She grabbed her purse and hurled it at Beth. "You selfish, ungrateful, miserable child!" Harper shrieked, her voice losing all composure, all pretense. "I gave you everything, and you throw me away for that worthless man, for him!" She pointed at me, and in that gesture was years of calculated deception finally cracking under the weight of exposure. "Bailiff," Foster said quietly, "remove Ms. Harper from the courtroom." 2 bailiffs moved toward Harper. She didn't resist, but she didn't stop raging either. As they escorted her out, she continued screaming at Beth at me at the entire courtroom. "You'll regret this, both of you. I'll have you arrested. I'll charge you with—" The courtroom doors closed behind her, cutting off her words, but not the echo of her fury. Richard Sutton sat frozen, his perfect composure completely shattered. His lips were moving silently, as if calculating how quickly his career was about to implode. Then there was movement in the gallery. Victor Chandler stood abruptly and rushed toward the courtroom exit. A bailiff moved to intercept him, but Victor was already pushing through the doors. Through the glass, I could see him practically running down the hallway. Mark Sterling squeezed my shoulder. It's over, Vaughn. It's finally over. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could only stare at Beth, who stood there with tears streaming down her face, still holding that flash drive like a weapon she'd finally discharged. Judge Foster adjusted his glasses and looked at me directly for the first time since the trial began. Mr. Richardson, he said quietly, I believe we have much to discuss regarding criminal referrals to the district attorney. Judge Foster's eyes were ice. The evidence presented is conclusive and irrefutable, he said. It proves a coordinated conspiracy of fraud, perjury, and witness tampering. The courtroom fell silent as he continued. Ms. Harper Richardson engaged in criminal conduct. Her allegations are fabricated. This court rules entirely in favor of Mr. Vaughn Richardson. My hands went numb. Mr. Richardson is awarded full custody of the marital residence and all jointly held assets. Ms. Harper must repay all fraudulently obtained funds. All allegations against Mr. Richardson are dismissed and expunged. Foster adjusted his glasses. Ms. Harper's attorney, Richard Sutton, knowingly participated in this conspiracy. His conduct violates professional ethics and is being referred to the state bar. Sutton's face drained of color. Ms. Harper Richardson, you are remanded into custody pending charges of perjury, conspiracy, and witness tampering. Two bailiffs approached. Harper rose on shaking legs, her composure shattered. This is absurd, she screamed, but her voice no longer carried authority. You may exercise your right to legal counsel, Foster said coldly. Handcuffs clicked into place. Her protests echoed uselessly. Then Victor Chandler sprang toward the exit, but officers intercepted him. He offered no resistance as they read his rights. He knew it was over. He too faced conspiracy and fraud charges. Within seconds, Harper and Victor were escorted out. Her cries faded behind the closing doors. Gerald Stone touched my shoulder. Congratulations, Vaughn. You won. I couldn't speak. Vindication felt heavy, overwhelming, not triumphant. Then Beth appeared. She stepped toward me through the thinning crowd eyes, red face pale. For a long moment we simply looked at each other, everything we had lost hanging between us. But she whispered Conshin Loy. Her voice trembled. Conshin Loy vi Hong Tin Bo. Conshin Loy vi Jiang He Mi. I crossed the room and pulled her into my arms before she could finish. She collapsed against me, sobbing. Don't apologize, I whispered. You were brave. I almost destroyed you, she said against my chest. No, you saved me. We stood there as the courtroom moved around us lawyers, packing their bags, bailiffs watching. Nothing else existed except my daughter and me, finally reunited. I love you, Dad, Beth whispered. I love you too. I'm proud of you. Mark Sterling approached, eyes wet. He rested a hand on our shoulders. Welcome back, buddy. Leaving the courtroom, my arm around Beth, her grip tight at my waist, I realized this victory wasn't about legal triumph. It was about getting my daughter back. 3 weeks later, we sat together on a park bench. 2 cups of coffee steamed between us. That morning, I had received my reinstatement letter, my job restored, accompanied by a formal apology. The company announced publicly that the allegations were false, part of Harper's conspiracy. Even Harrison Reed had called to apologize. But none of that occupied my thoughts. I'm glad we're here, Beth said, watching the sunset streak the sky with orange and purple. Me too. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't recorded those conversations, she murmured. What if I never found the truth? I looked at her, strong, courageous, far more than she realized. Then I would have lost everything, I said. But you didn't let that happen. She leaned her head on my shoulder, something she hadn't done in years. I'm sorry it took me so long to see the truth. You were manipulated by someone you trusted, I said. Your mother was skilled at deception, but you still found the truth. You chose to act. We sat in silence as the sun slipped behind the horizon. The park grew dim and peaceful. Families packed up picnics. Joggers finished their laps. Couples walked quietly past us. Life tested us, I said softly, and we passed. Beth gave me a real smile, tender, hopeful. What about Mom? She asked. What happens to her? The courts will decide, I answered. But she'll face consequences. Maybe someday she'll understand what she's lost. She's already lost me, Beth said. Her voice was steady, but sorrow threaded through it. I can't forgive her for using me as a weapon against you. I squeezed her hand. That's your right. As night settled, I realized that the courtroom's verdict meant little beside this moment. I hadn't just reclaimed my reputation. I had reclaimed my daughter, and with her, my life. The man who walked out of that courthouse wasn't the broken man who'd entered. He had survived the fire and come out renewed. As Beth and I left the park hand in hand, I allowed myself to believe the worst was behind us. That real, lasting happiness was finally within reach. For the first time in years, I felt hope. Truth may take time to surface, but when it does, it sets us free. I hadn't lost my daughter. I had her back, and at last, I had myself again. In the months that followed, Beth and I worked to rebuild the rhythms of our lives step by step. Healing wasn't instantaneous, but each conversation, each shared meal, each quiet walk felt like stitching together pieces of something once torn apart. I watched her grow steadier, kinder to herself, more confident in her ability to discern truth from manipulation, and I in turn found strength in knowing that trust, though wounded, could mend. We were learning to stand again not as victims of the past, but as partners in a future we chose together. Looking back at my story, I realized how blind I was to what was happening right in front of me. For 32 years, I thought I knew my wife. I thought I understood trust. I was wrong. If you're listening to this true story, let me be clear. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the warning signs. Don't assume the people closest to you are always who they claim to be. Trust your instincts, and if something feels wrong, investigate. Don't bury your head in the sand. My daughter Beth taught me the most valuable lesson: the truth, no matter how painful, will set you free. When she chose to uncover what her mother had done, she didn't just save my life, she saved our relationship. She showed me that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite being terrified. This is a true story that really happened to me. By God's grace, I survived it. This true story proves that justice exists and that family can be restored. I share this Grandpa Stories moment because so many others face similar situations: divorce, betrayal, manipulation, and they feel alone. You're not alone. If a grandfather can lose everything and get it back again, so can you. These Grandpa Stories remind us that truth matters and that you should never give up on your children. What I learned: never underestimate the power of truth. Never give up on your family. Never lose faith. If my story resonated with you, please share it. Comment below, tell me your story. Subscribe to our channel for more real stories from real people. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a new true story from us, because these Grandpa Stories remind us what truly matters in life, love, honesty, and never giving up.